Whenever you're ready, Jennifer, you can start.
Okay, welcome everyone that has started to show up this evening. I'm sure we will have some other guests join us. You are listening to the Reston Association South Lakes District listening session. And my name is Jennifer Juszczyk. I'm the current South Lakes District Director. We were really hoping at some point this year we would be able to see all of our members in person, but unfortunately, as COVID has had other plans for us. So I'm really glad that we're able to host something online, and we were able to get some of you here. I wanted to kind of start by introducing some of my fellow board members and staff members. We are all here to help you in any way we can. So first, and I will start at the top of my list so I don't miss anyone. First, I see Bob Petrine, who is an at-large director and our current treasurer on the board. And we have Sarah Salvaraj D'Souza, who is an at-large member on our board.
Did great on my last name. Thank you.
Did I? I got it right. Good for me.
Yes, you did.
I didn't even practice before that one, so I must have it committed to memory. And then we have Tim Dowling, who is also on our board and represents the not Underwoods, I'm going to remember this. See, this is what happens. Now I'm going to mess up. You are just at large, but
Yes.
You live in Hunter Woods. I had Hunter Woods in my head. I was like, no, that's Karen. But he is an at-large member on our board as well. And I think right now that is all of the board members we have joining us. Also, just to remind people, I know both Bob and Sarah also live in the South Lakes District, even though they are at-large members. And then we have some staff here with us this evening. We have Mike Leone, who is our gracious host for the evening and our Director of Communications. Kim Adams, who is our head of our Covenants team. Chris Shoemaker, who is in charge of capital projects and a big capital project actually in our South Lakes District. And I think that is all for staff and the board. So welcome everyone, glad to have you here. This is our fourth of our fifth listening sessions. These listening sessions are geared towards having a lot of member interaction. So this evening, you are free to unmute yourself. Obviously, for everyone's benefit, we'll stay muted as long as you're not speaking, but want to make sure that you have the ability to speak if you so choose. We also have the chat feature available, so feel free to put something in chat, especially if you don't have a long comment or you want to agree or add on to something someone else is saying, or if you prefer to ask a question that way, we'll be following the chat this evening and try to get through to all of your questions. We also have our fifth listening session this coming Monday, October the 6th at 6:30. And there's a link on the RA calendar on the RA website. And that is our at-large listening session. So you'll have three hosts that evening. Bob, Sarah, and Tim will be hosting jointly that evening. I think that, we want to hear a lot of your comments and answer any questions that you might have. We want it to start while you're brainstorming some of your questions or comments on a few different topics. But otherwise, we hope to not be speaking at you this evening and doing more listening. The first one is on our open spaces throughout Reston, which we're lucky enough to have several open spaces. We would normally have our guru at Reston Association, our acting CEO, Larry, Butler speak about that, but he is joining or representing RA this evening at the Cornerstones event. And so he has left that task to me. We just wanted to share that we were really pleased to see so many of our members, especially during COVID, really take advantage and use a lot of our open spaces because we have over 1,300 acres of them. And we certainly saw people out there on the pathways. I saw some, a lot of social distancing going on the lakes, some music, especially going on in the lakes. A lot of people were using our ball fields, certainly getting a lot of fresh air and exercise as we needed to socially distance. What occurred though during that was we saw a lot more trash around Reston, and our central services team did a great job of trying to keep up with all of the extra litter that we were producing. Certainly encourage all of you who are out on RA properties. If you would like to go on your walks, feel free to take a small trash bag with you. If you find anything out there, we would absolutely appreciate you helping us with that initiative. Some of the other challenges that we're facing are some weather events. We've certainly had periods of drought, lots of heavy rainfall, and our staff have been out there trying to deal with whichever one comes our way. I remember Larry saying that even, I guess it's been about a month ago now, we had a lot of high winds and we actually had one of our bridges just go flying away. So Chris has another job that has been added to his list of things that are in need of repair. And we certainly will try as much as we can to keep up with those. In the South Lakes District, I know in the last year and a half, we had seen some concerns raised by residents of the water quality in our lakes, and our teams have been very active trying to keep up with some extra monitoring on those lakes, some extra treatments on the lakes. And so far, I've seen an increase of the quality of the water in the lakes. I hope that you guys have too. And that's my fault because I asked the staff to allow people to unmute themselves. We will try to kick that person out, and we might actually now have to mute you since we allowed a privilege and it was abused, probably by a non-member. So as I was saying, our lakes, I think we're seeing some positive, after some of the investment we've done in the lakes, I think we're seeing some positive results there, and certainly have some more projects that we can contribute to that. And then two very interesting projects that Larry just reminded me to mention is that the USGS is beginning a long-term stream monitoring program in both the Glade and the Snaketon Branch watersheds to advance the science and benefits of urban stream restoration. And RA has allowed them to do that monitoring work. And so we're excited to see what the results might be. And also the College of William and Mary, assisted by George Mason and Virginia Tech, is starting a research project on managing non-invasive plants in mitigated wetlands and stream restoration areas. So that is a quick update on open spaces. And now that you've all had a few minutes to think about what your questions might be, I would love to hear what questions or comments or things that you want us as board members to pay attention to. If we've turned off now the ability to unmute yourself, go ahead and raise your hand or wave at me, and I will attempt to unmute you. In the meantime, from when I started, though, we have had another member of our board join us. So I'd like to welcome Karen Anton, our current president, and Hunter Woods Dogwood District Director to the
Thanks,
meeting.
Jennifer. I apologize for being a few minutes late.
No worries. So with that, does anyone have anything they'd like to share? In chat, we have some chat. Oh, we have not nice chat. Oh, I think I can unmute you. Kathleen, I think I'm asking to unmute. I think you might have to hit the accept button. No. Are you?
No, I'm unmuted.
Yay.
Yay.
Nice. Well, welcome.
Thank you. My comment, question, obnoxious observation is related to the budget. And I am wondering about the debt that RA has. It's my understanding and belief that there is no, if not minor, debt that RA has. And my thought is that debt is a management tool. More than likely, most people have experienced it. They get a mortgage, they buy a car, they finance going to school. People use debt to leverage their financial situation. And I think it may be a wise path for RA to incur some debt. I know that legally they're allowed to borrow against future and current assessments, and that with that money, they could repair any of the amenities that might require attention. I would recommend that a great deal of attention be paid to the Fairfax County plan for managing debt. They have done an excellent job for at least 20 years. And because of their excellent financial management, they have AAA ratings with all three of the rating agencies. So that is one of my comments, is that I'd like to see RA use my future assessment and borrow money against it. That's one idea. Another idea is that the way in which the assessment is leveled seems grossly unfair to me, in that everyone in the community pays exactly the same amount of money, slightly less than $800 this year. Well, those of us who are fortunate enough to live in our own home may have invested in it a number of years ago. And now some of the homes are worth more than other homes. And I do think that those individuals with higher valued income properties perhaps should pay on a graduated basis, that it would be worthwhile investigating. And frankly, I know the board has investigated it ad nauseum, but they've never brought it forward to change the way in which the assessment is leveled. I would really appreciate seeing that happen. Or in light of those first two thoughts not being palatable, feasible, etc., I'd like to just see the assessment raised to $1,000 and get enough money in the system to fix everything. So I had three ideas of varying degrees of feasibility and acceptance. I know that many people would argue against them, but I'd like to see those investigated as financial tools, ways in which the association can manage everything that we're responsible for in a wonderful manner. Thank you for listening to me.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime. Thanks for submitting or were you willing to speak? I know as our treasurer, Bob Petrine was probably thinking a lot of things. So, Bob, if I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're okay with it, I have some thoughts too. But I knew you probably would if you would like to ask Kathleen some questions or have a dialogue.
No, I think they're all three are very valid ideas. We have discussed at both the board level and fiscal committee borrowing on a very targeted basis. To date, that we haven't seen a need to do it. Number one, and number two, the board as a whole has been reluctant to do other than pay as you go. Now, that is not to say that as we are now in the mode of renovating virtually all of our major amenities, specifically the pools are the most expensive. There has been thoughts about how best to do that. And I will say at the present time, we're still working through. As regards your second idea about the assessment methodology, currently the amended deed says everybody who is a Reston Association member pays the same amount. But I will say that that covenant will exist through January 1st of 2026, which seems like a long way off, but it isn't, particularly where you have to get consensus about methodology as you proposed. And secondly, to conduct a referendum. So if we change the collection methodology in any way, shape, or form, that has to be voted on by a majority of the members. The third idea about increasing the assessments, I hesitate to promise. There is a certain segment within of our population that would not even think about, in a couple $100, $200 or $300 increase in their assessment rate. To date, it has been unpalatable, even when we increase it by $10 or $15 a year. But that's not to say that there couldn't be consideration given. Last thing that I will say, and it should come as no surprise to everybody, we have 15 pools, the oldest of which is almost 50 years old, and the newest one is slightly less than 40. They were deeded to us by the developers. We are responsible for their maintenance and upkeep. If we choose to repurpose any of those pools, we have to replace those pools, as Larry Butler, our acting CEO, would say, with like amenities for all of the population that would likely use that amenity. So it isn't a get out of jail free card. It is a change in capital budgeting, and probably over time, should we decide to, or should the board, whichever board that might be, decide to make a change, change the operating structure of RA. So I hope I've answered your questions, and I think they're very, very valid ones that would happily discuss on Monday evening when we discuss the budget. Happy to do that. Happy to bring those forward.
Jennifer, I know that Sarah had her hand up. I don't know if she still wants to speak.
I think Sarah, you can unmute yourself, I
I
believe.
can. I'll let you go first, Jennifer, and then I'll make my comment. Go for
Oh, sure. I thank you, Bob, for that. It was very thorough. I would say just personally, I sit on the fiscal committee, and so I've been interacting a lot with our fiscal committee members since I've been on the board since April, and I was kind of one of those geeky people who went to all the fiscal meetings even before I was on the board. So I've been listening for quite a while. And what is interesting, or what I feel like I've learned over time, is that RA is very lucky in that we have a healthy reserve. We've been prudent with our money, and we do have some money in the bank that we can use if we choose to on some of these larger projects. In the last few months, so fiscal has actually been very vocal in recommending to the board that we not borrow. And we have talked about it as a board. And as Bob said, I think it was John Mooney he even brought up and asked for it to be on the agenda on Monday night when we do our budget work session. So I think that it will definitely still be a discussion. But I'm hoping that if we're prudent in our operating budgets, that we can use all the tools in our toolbox to get us there. We can kind of combine efforts. On the assessment piece, what I was thinking is I've heard from a fair number of members, and certainly more during COVID, that feel that the current assessment is a lot of money for them to pay. And so I think as a board, we really need to always try to balance between, what do we need as all of Reston, and how are we able to afford that with all the members in play. So the idea about balancing the assessments between different housing rates, I actually thought that was a really good idea when I heard it a few years ago. And then someone reminded me that a lot of people did buy their houses in Reston 20 or 30 years ago, and they're now retired or they're on fixed incomes. And so if you just take that or weigh that into play, or put that into play, you might be charging people who are on fixed incomes, even though they have a house that's very valuable. And so that's been on my mind as we've talked about whether to go down that road or not. And I think that was it. Oh, I was thinking, the way that you could balance that is if you look at the house and then you kind of look at the income level, and that just seems very personal for RA to get involved in figuring out how much people can actually afford based on both of those. So that feels too invasive to me. But I'm sure that the discussion will be out there. And as Bob said, when the deed comes up for renewal, we'll have more increasing pressure to actually make a decision on it. So Sarah, I'll let you go. And then Kathleen, I see that you would like to comment again. So I'll unmute you again.
Thank you, Jennifer. Kathleen, I have a request for you. And this is since early last year when COVID hit, and in multiple conversations with our past CEO, there were quite a few members who had written to him with hardship letters. Their situation had changed drastically when COVID hit, and were now not able to pay their dues. And Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the last count we had was about 30 members who were going through that process where they were not able to pay and were in collections. We've consistently, I think, Hank asked, and there's been discussions going on with Friends of Reston, the board that you serve on, because that is the vehicle if we wanted to help them. So if anything you can do to help us on that end to move the conversation further will be huge. So it kind of hits both of your points, the second and the third, because when we go to $1,000, there are a lot of us who cannot, it's a big chunk of our family budgets. So we need to have a vehicle that can help people before we get there. So that was my little request. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, let's see if I can go back through this. My first point should have been when I opened my mouth. If we have sufficient funds, why are we discussing closing any amenities? That is my challenging question. I feel very strongly about swimming. I feel that if you can drive, you should be able to swim. Both are life essential activities. No one knows when they're going to fall overboard or trip into a lake. No one has any idea. They need to know how to swim. All right, I'm not going to go into that kind of a boring dialogue because you guys don't need to hear that. About the Friends of Reston, we have a charter. We're a 501c3 and we are required to follow the federal mandates for that. We are licensed, if you will, to work on specific things. We are not authorized to make payments, operational payments to RA. So we can't cover the dues, which in fact are operational funds. That's not something we can do legally. I don't have an answer for you. My guess is that if these individuals qualify with Fairfax County for a reduced tax rate that they have to pay, then it is a very strong argument why we should either forgive or allow them a period of time to pay the money. And that's all I can say about the Friends of Reston covering unpaid annual assessment. But I would like to offer that I was a 2-term president of the RA board. I served years on that board. I was chief of staff for Supervisor Hudgens. So I'm very familiar with financial details, both of the county and of RA. And I truly believe that debt is a legitimate financial management tool that we're not using. And I'm not arguing that we should go deeply into debt. I'm arguing that we should formulate a plan by which we follow certain expenditures offset by certain revenues. And that's what Fairfax County's done, and they've been highly successful.
Thank you. I think Tim and then Tammy and then Bob will go in that order next. And that was very helpful, Kathleen, for the information. I'm a huge fan of researching, so I will be researching the Fairfax County debt plan. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you, Kathleen, for starting us out with such a great set of questions. On your second point about the assessment being unfair because we all pay the same amount, I wanted to point out that Columbia Association bases its assessment on property values. If you go onto their webpage, they actually have the formula that they use. They give some examples. If your house is worth $400,000, you would pay this amount. If your house is worth $800,000, you'd pay, in Columbia, you would pay over $2,000 in assessment. And so as we get closer to the 2016 deed revisions, I'd be very much interested in exploring the experience of Columbia Association and also investigating how they have handled the very legitimate concerns raised by Jennifer in terms of people who buy a house that appreciates a great deal over time and then are on fixed income. So thank you for raising that issue.
Okay, Tammy, let me hit this button, and I think that be good.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim, for that. And I would, when you look at Columbia, look at their debt situation. And I don't know the particulars of it, but that certainly needs to be considered. What I wanted to talk about was, first of all, a shout out to Cam Adams from Covenants, to whom I spoke earlier today. working on Reston master plan details, he was extraordinarily helpful in filling in some lost information that we needed for that. So thank you, Cam. What I really wanted to say was I'm a little gobsmacked that at board meetings, up pops $1 million expenditures for an event barn or a lake bar, not $1 million for a lake barge, but huge expenditures that are coming forward from staff. And now we have a covered tennis court. This was brought up at the last board meeting, and I implore the board, while we are in COVID crisis and we are in a huge debate about how to maintain our infrastructure, which is super important, that we are without some really critical senior staff, particularly a CEO, and Larry has been gracious enough to step in. Let's concentrate on getting RA and the systems back up and working. I also hope that everybody on this board at this listening session realizes that the tone of the board, the complexion of the board changes every single year. So what was done back when Kathleen was president is not necessarily what's happening now. And we had gone through a sort of process renewal or safety, I don't know what word you want to put on it, or we had spending limits, and then the next board erased all that. So we keep reverting back to processes that are less than Reston as a 53-year-old organization should have, in my opinion. I was shocked that we didn't have these and that we don't have certain checks and balances that I assumed a organization of this age would already have in place. So I implore the board, please, let's not be pulling out of the hat more expensive projects until we get stabilized and until we actually know who our leaders are going to be going in the future, and we make these decisions critically on what infrastructure is going to be maintained and what that schedule will be. In other words, our cup is full of debate. I don't think we need any more. Thank you so much, and thanks to the board for all your volunteer time and the efforts and hours you put in serving. I can tell you firsthand, it's enormous watching a board member. So thank you, and thanks for the research that you do on these issues. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Tammy. And Kathleen hit on facilities, and you followed her up with facilities. Very glad that this topic came up. I think that we need all of you, and you need to talk to your neighbors and your friends and the different clubs that you're in Reston, and any Reston resident that you see out there on the paths when you're walking or at the tennis courts. The feedback from the membership on what the future of our facilities should be is critical. It is something that the board has been asking for. It is very difficult as a board member to make, $1 million decisions on replacing facilities without completely knowing what all of our members out there think. So please, I encourage you to encourage everyone to share that feedback with us. And also wanted to recognize, I see Julie Bitzer's on, and I saw Farrell, there's Farrell. John Farrell is also on our, I think they call him chairperson and co-chair, or vice chair of our PRAC committee, which has been furiously working on the first reach out of feedback directly on Shadowwood Pool, which I know that we have flyers out and different we had a survey online. I know that Bob and Sarah were delivering things to doorsteps. So we're trying to get that feedback in multiple forms so that we have some good information. Obviously, Shadowwood is one of the more pressing facilities that we have because it's inoperable at this moment, and the board needs to decide whether to take action in the short term or whether to come up with a more long-term plan. But I know that those on PrAC are looking to get feedback on all of our facilities and a method to go about doing that. So please keep sharing that feedback with us. And Bob, I believe you were next. And
I was
then
going to-
John Farrell, I will call you after.
I'm just going to bring up two very boring facts. Number one, staff does not have any flexibility in seeking to be paid the assessment. That's not permitted. You must attempt to collect the money. Secondly, there is a program for tax relief that if the member applies and is found consistent with the requirement, which is the same as Fairfax County's tax relief program, their assessment level is cut in half. The last comment that I will make is staff works with any member who they understand are having issues to do payment programs. So it isn't as if at the end of the first quarter of each year that everything goes into collection. Staff does work with our members that are having issues or seek some sort of payment program, and it's very, very reasonable, at a very reasonable cost, and in many cases at half the level that the typical member pays. Now we'll get off the boring detail. Get back to some more interesting things.
Oh no, wait, some of us have to like detail, and some of us have to like research, and some of us have to like outreach, and that's what balances us all as a big team. So thank you for your comments, Bob. And John, I believe you are next, and then I see you, Deborah, so you'll be after John.
Thank you, Jennifer. Having had my name taken in vain earlier. Yes, I have the pleasure of serving as vice chair. Jennifer, vice chair. I don't need the promotion. I can do without the.
Sorry.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to begin by thanking several members of the staff. We distributed 1,700 door knockers to the 17 clusters around South Lakes, which basically covers, I don't know, more than half of the South Lakes district, the 17 clusters around Shadowwood, which is a little bit more than half, I think, of the South Lakes district. It is stunning the extent to which people have responded. My last number that I heard is we were north of 400 responses, which is absolutely blow your doors off. That's a response rate that's higher than the turnout for a primary to select a governor or the chairman of the Board of Supervisors. So we've got a lot of people have in this Shadowwood catchment area. A lot of people have told us what they want to do at South Lakes, and we've learned a lot. One of the things we've learned is Shadowwood is in shadows far more than when my daughter first went to Shadowwood. My oldest daughter, who's now 39. God, I have a 39-year-old, really? But she made me a grandfather, so, you know, good things there. At any rate, she learned to swim there. Well, we don't have swim lessons there because the water's too cold. And the water's too cold because the trees have doubled in height. And the trees are overhanging into the enclosure, and they're depositing the pine needles and the leaves into the water. And people see that and think the water's dirty. Those are things that we can fix pretty quickly. Question not unanswered at this point. Chris is going to get back to us with some numbers as to what would it take to heat the water. Not that we're advocating putting a heater in there, but you either cut the trees down or you add a water heater in order to make that thing work. But we're getting overwhelmingly the responses we are getting by more than 2 to 1 are telling us that the community around South Lakes want South Lakes to be a pool and to be open. And they need South Lakes water, the Shadowwood water, to be clean, and they need some sunlight to hit the deck. Much more when my daughter was taking swim lessons there, 80% of the pool was in sunshine and the sun was warming the water. Nate tells us over the weekend that the water hardly ever gets above 70 degrees, and getting a little kid to take a swimming lesson in water that's around 70 degrees is very hard. People don't want, especially kids, don't want to be in water like that. They turn blue real fast. So I wanted to thank, for the board's edification, I wanted to thank Harb Brock, who helped recruit people to do the door hangers. I did 150 myself. I wanted to thank Nate for showing up to the open houses that we had this past weekend, and Laura for helping us design the SurveyMonkey questionnaire. We're getting a lot of good information, but it's all pretty consistent. The Shadowwood community wants their pool to stay there by big numbers, and they want the water to be warm, and they want the water to be free of pine needles and leaves. And that can consist of, at the very easiest, trimming the trees. It's amazing the degree to which the trees, A, have grown, and B, overhang into the enclosure. And you don't need a DRB approval to trim those limbs back. And we may need to do some more to thin out the trees so that we get sunlight. The other thing is lap lanes. Big request for lap lanes. There used to be lap lanes there. I understand it's not a full 25 meters. It's only about 23, but I do remember we had lap lanes in that pool when we were there. I want to take just 2 more minutes. The other night we had a meeting, and we saw a capital budget, which showed not the huge spike in capital expenditures that I had seen earlier in the year with other capital budgets. I guess Larry and Chris had worked to flatten them out and extend them. But the other thing I learned in talking both to Nate and to Chris is that of the 4 pools that were kind of on the chopping block, none of them are faced with a immediate threat to public health and safety as we faced over at Lake Thoreau. So one of the things that we can do, Bob, is we can stretch out even more than in the current capital budget. We can stretch out the renovations of, right now you've only got Golf Course Island and Shadowwood in the 10-year budget. Tall Oaks and Newbridge is not even in the 10-year budget, never mind the 5-year budget. So it's not like there's an immediate threat to health and safety on any of those pools. And I was surprised by that. But the other thing I want to bring up, and I was really surprised by, is the cost to renovate our tennis courts. At least if you look at that budget, renovating our tennis courts looks to be, well, if you look at an individual tennis court renovation, it's almost equal to renovating a pool. And as somebody pointed out to me the other day, on any hour of the day, our tennis courts, we have 54 of them, they can only accommodate 4 people. And if you multiply that by 12 hours from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., you screw around with the numbers, you're only talking about 2,500 people maximum usage per day. We have no way of measuring usage, but it's only 2,500, which is the equivalent of what, 2 pools maybe? So if we just finished redoing Hook Road, and if we're going to be doing all these other tennis, and I'm in favor of renovating the tennis courts, don't get me wrong, but I just want us to keep proportion here. If we're going to renovate tennis courts, and we should, then renovating pools, there's an equity issue here, because there are far more people using our pools than using our tennis courts. by any stretch of the imagination. And that's before you go out and measure them with some kind of technology to do that. The last thing I wanted to mention, Jennifer, is the other night at the board meeting, there was a conversation about delaying, and I gave Chris a heads up on this, delaying the relocation of the Hook Road baseball fields backstops, and to incorporate that into a major site plan. And one of the things that wasn't brought up is that county processing of a major site plan, you're looking at 18 months to 2 years. And there's a safety issue at Hook Road, at the baseball field that is at the corner of Hook Road and Fairways. There's only like 3 or 4 feet between the backstop and the edge of the curb. And those fields, I've checked with Reston Little League, and I've talked with our contact from PRAC with Reston Little League, Anne-Marie Swope. They use that fields, and as I remembered with my 4 kids who once played RYB, that field's used by 7 and 8 year olds. And those kids are not the most careful when it comes to staying off of the roadways. And I remember as a coach at that level, half the time I had to appoint a parent to act as a traffic cop. If that field in particular, if removing that disturbs less than 2,500 square feet, we don't need a site plan. And it's a safety issue. And I think if you hear from Little League, or if you ask Little League, they would tell you that that's a priority for them. And it shouldn't wait for us to do the major site plan requirements to put in the restrooms. We all want the restrooms at Hook Road. Don't get me wrong, that's great. Let's file the major site plan. But we shouldn't delay relocating the backstop, particularly the one at that corner, while we process a major site plan and the delay that would be involved. So I asked Chris to take a look at the square footage that's involved in moving that backstop closer, further away from the streets. I won't put him on the spot. I'm asking him if he's got that number now, but I would hope that before you delay that safety action, that we explore not having to include it in any kind of a site plan. Again, if it's less than 2,500 square feet of disturbed area, you don't need a site plan approval. So I'm pretty sure Little League stands with me in saying that's an improvement at Hook Road that needs to be undertaken as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I will keep that on my radar screen. The Hook Road backstop movage, and make sure that we get enough information before we pass the budget on that one. And thank you so much for the update and all the work that the PRAC committee is putting in on gathering feedback from the membership. I knew that you or Julie would have the latest update, so appreciate you sharing that with all of us. And I think Deborah was next, and Dave Wylie, I see you. That work? Hey, I think we can hear you now.
Hi, thank you very much. Wanted to thank everyone for all the volunteer hours that everyone puts in for making our organization work. But I wanted to focus more specifically, and I did just now see a message from Leslie about my concern, which is the ice and snow on the paths when it is a snowy winter. I have to confess I've not checked the Farmer's Almanac to know whether a 2021-2022 winter is anticipated to be snowy or icy, but I did want to point out that when it is icy and snowy, and when the ice and snow is left on the paths for a significant amount of time, dog walkers, older people, younger people, a lot of falls, it's very, very dangerous to have ice and snow on the paths for a long period of time, especially on the major roadways like, for example, Twin Branches Road and the RA paths that are not the hidden ones so much, but the ones that get a lot of foot traffic and dog traffic. when the dogs still have to be walked, whether the weather is good or bad or indifferent. And so I would like, even if the RA needs to prioritize certain paths over others, maybe if they don't have the staff or power to do every single path, I can understand that. But if there's going to be a priority made to do certain paths all the way, rather than a halfway job on all of them, to do a full job on some of them, and then to maybe publicize a map of recommended dog walking paths or recommended paths for, within 24 hours of a snow, and have some kind of a commitment that, those of us that need to walk our dogs 4 times a day in our case, that are and really it's not enough for many of them to stay just inside a neighborhood cluster. That might be a way that we could deal with solving this problem in a cost-effective way, which I'm very sensitive to as well, in respecting both the need and the expense. And also just wanted to mention that I've been putting some things in the chat. And so if anybody hasn't looked at the chat, the Reston Corral is doing a concert season this year, and just wanted to give an update to members as well as board members as well as participants that we will be having our concerts online so that you can see those from the comfort of your living room or wherever you want to be. But we will actually be performing together this year, differently from last year where everything was online. So take a look at that. And I posted the link to our concert season schedule, which is towards the beginning of the chat after all the garbage there.
Thank you. I was actually going to say the Reston crowd, because I scrolled up and saw that comment and didn't realize you were doing that. So thanks for sharing that with everyone. And also for your comment that's pretty inventive too, that maybe we concentrate highly on some trails. That way we have at least something cleared in all the different areas of Reston versus all of them. I do remember, and hopefully I'm quoting it right, we got an email last year when I saw some people that were concerned about trail clearing, that RA clears the trails after 2 inches of snow is on the ground. And from some member feedback, they talked about making sure, especially the paths that are a little bit more steep, and concentrating in those areas where after they might clear them, that the ice might come into play. Especially when there are inclines on the trails. But that's a great idea. I can pass that on to our central services team. And I believe, Dave Wylie, you are next.
David Wylie, I believe.
I
had
see
his
you,
hand up.
Tammy. Yes. I think I unmuted you, Dave.
Dave Wylie here. I put my chat.
You're very low, Dave, so you might want to put your mic just a little bit closer to your head.
Okay, is that any better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. I appreciate the comments so far. Mine are a little bit different. Of course, with Hank Lynch retiring, I know the board is in a search mode on that. But then I was additionally, I would say, dismayed to hear the IT director resign right after that. And I was concerned that we had to hire a new CEO before we could hire a new IT director, which puts that down quite a few months. And just want to know if that was in fact the process, or whether those are 2 separate recs that can go ahead with Larry as acting. Back over.
I remember at our last meeting on Thursday night, Larry said that they are accepting resumes for the director position. They are, I believe what was also in the packet from staff is that we delay hiring that position until second quarter, from what I read. So I do think that I've noticed that myself, some conflicting, and maybe they're thinking of a different plan. So I can ask Larry and staff which direction are they going? But I do know that the positions posted out there, they're accepting resumes. Some of my background is in IT, so believe me, I'm very passionate about making sure that the IT services through RA are running smoothly. And when you have that absence of technical staff, it is pretty difficult to fill it with or have someone else pinch hit in that area because it is so specialized. We do have an outside consulting firm called Red River that is monitoring the RA systems, even though our IT director left. And so, I do feel confident that we are still, working on IT services throughout the association. But it certainly would be better to have the focus of a director in place. And we also have a committee that the board created. I think it was the board meeting before the new board was seated. So February or March, I want to say, the board passed the IT committee, and we did appoint people to the IT committee. And so I would love to see that member IT committee be able to meet and help move us forward on some of our IT initiatives. So I'll definitely keep up with that one too, Dave. Thank you for your comments. And Tammy, I believe you had your hand up.
Thank you. One thing I wanted to share information-wise is that the Reston Community Center has just spent $5 million of our tax money to renovate their pool. One of the charges that they made when they did that is to drown proof every Restonian. So please keep that in mind when we're having the goal of not having a child not get swimming lessons. RCC is supposed to be doing that. And speaking to that, let's concentrate on using the partnership with RCC to augment what RA usually does. They don't have to give swimming lessons to everybody because people can go over to RCC and get them. Cost is not an issue there, according to the meeting I attended and what they said at that time. Another concept that I wanted to introduce is the patterns of family life have changed drastically. I'm gray-haired. When I had little kids, what I did with the children is vastly different from how families operate now. And regarding pool usage, we are a captive, as is every community across the country, of lack of certified lifeguards. We have a climate that's getting hotter, so we might have a longer pool season possible, but we don't have the lifeguards. In addition to that, families have 2 working parents, if there are 2 parents in the family, and they're stressed and their free time is very limited. So the luxury of a babysitter or childcare to take children to a pool, perhaps the childcare has a contract with RA to use a pool, and that's tremendous. I'm not saying any of this is a bad thing. It's just recognizing that pool usage patterns have changed. And I'm not saying pool isn't important, but pools are maximally available 3 months or less per year. So in my view of assessing pools and the expense, we have to be realistic and consider a very limited usage. Tennis courts, obviously they're closed for maintenance, but with our milder weathers, they can be open maybe 10 and a half, 11 months a year. I'm not putting tennis ahead of pools by any stretch. I play neither, but that brings into the question, what other amenities are becoming important for Restonian families? And I think playgrounds and a place to gather and picnic areas and that kind of thing is universally attractive to almost everybody. So I would hope that staff and board are looking at the maybe upping the quality of playgrounds, etc. I know working on the Reston master plan, we're hoping that we're going to be able to have at least 3 more big playgrounds in Reston. And we're hoping that the Fairfax County Park Authority would lead on that, and that RA won't be, quote, stuck being the only playground provider. But our Fairfax County parks are used to capacity, and we are so lucky to be living in this beautiful community with so much glorious open space and the facilities that RA does provide. So I hope that somehow we can adjust costs. And I think everybody has their own way they would adjust costs, but hold the line on assessments. The idea that we can up these assessments when some people are struggling so hard to pay their expenses and job hours have been cut or whatever it is. I think we need to be very sensitive about how fast and how high we raise assessments. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. And I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that what stuck out to me in your comments was that there are parents or two income households out there, and that parents are struggling and stressed, because that is my household every day with a 3-year-old. I just wanted to follow up as we kind of talk about facilities in general, with some statistics for those of you who like that type of information, because our capital projects team is estimating that the cost of all projects in the next 5 years for facilities would be $16.4 million in that ballpark. Our aquatics represents 36% of that, and tennis represents 23% of that. So together they represent 59% of all of our capital projects to be executed in the next 5 years. And I think I had a lot of stats on what we were doing around Shadowwood Pool. Most of them have already passed because we've been doing them over the last few weeks. But the one that is coming up is the PrAC team came up with even reaching outside of households directly. And they're going to have an article in the upcoming Terracet Elementary School October newsletter to encourage member feedback and survey completion for their Shadowwood feedback. And I, learned as I have a 3-year-old this summer and was looking at some different options for where we might be able to put her in person, that there are a lot of our community organizations that are using some of our facilities as a group instead of just looking at it from an individual perspective. So I was looking at Hunter Woods Cooperative Preschool and the Reston Children's Center, and learned that a lot of them, were walking kids that went to those centers to our pools. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think, Deborah, did you have your hand up again? Or I can look at the chat. What about the other elementary school newsletter, since family with elementary school aged children seem to be major users of the RA pools per their survey? I don't know if they've reached out. I assume if they reached out to Terracet, they probably went to Sunrise Valley. But Julie is on the line, and John's still here. John, you have your hand up, so you might have an answer to that for us.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. The answer is we looked at Debbie. We reached out to Terraset because the Terraset attendance area overlaps the 17 clusters that were immediately around the Shadowwood pool. Our object here was not to do a town-wide solicitation of community input, but rather to look at specifically the community around the Shadowwood pool. And one of the important things about the reason we did that is going back to my days on PPAC with Bob Simon. Well, I asked him, so how come we have 15 pools, which is well above the national average? And he said two things, which I think it's important for us to keep in mind. He wanted to have a pool close enough for everybody to walk to the pool. And so the kids who live around Shadowwood pool would have, trying to walk all the way over to RCC is more than a mile hike. And if you have a mom who's working two jobs, a single mom working two jobs, RCC is not a solution, particularly in the summer months, to get over there. But the other point that he made, and others make it when we talk about our pools, is our pools are a community gathering space. They reinforce community. People go to the pool, they meet their neighbors, their kids. I mean, everybody I know learns to meet their neighbors through their kids. Their kids are playing together. You go out and call them in for dinner, and oh, there's Bobby and there's Joni, and oh, you're Joni's mom and you're Bobby's mom. And the same thing happens at the pools. That it is a community. It is a place that fosters community, that enables community. More than our tennis courts. I mean, I've watched, having lived around tennis courts, people come, they play their match, and then they go. But people hang around a pool. And in the course of hanging around the pool, they build community, and they meet their neighbors, and they interact with their neighbors. So that's why we have so many pools. It was part of Simon's original vision to enable people to walk to a pool and not have to get in a car and drive. But also enable people to build community and get to know who their neighbors are. So I think those are important functions that need to be included when we talk about pools and renovating pools. It's also important to know that, if there was a need to stretch out the renovations of, I guess there are 2 pools that are on, or 3 pools that are on the 10-year schedule, it's pretty clear we can do that if we need to. Not that I encourage it, but if for budgetary reasons or assessment reasons we needed to stretch out instead of doing, I guess Shadowwood is scheduled for 2023. If there was some reason that we needed to stretch it out, our pools are in pretty good shape. Yeah, it'd be they're old looking and they're not the latest and greatest. But if a pool is a hole in the ground with water in it, that's our pools are all of our pools are functioning very nicely in that regard. So I think the first issue with Shadowwood is what can we do at a lower cost to get the attendance area at Shadowwood up? And it's clear that making $196,000 is already budgeted for Shadowwood repairs. Making those repairs is important, and cutting back the trees, especially the trees that overhang the enclosure. Yeah, doing the pruning of those are going to be important to get the usage back up, and letting the people who live in the Shadowwood condominium and in the Springwood condominium, letting them know that that pool is there for them, and to encourage them to get a pass. And it might be that Friends of Reston can help get these people who are on free and reduced meals, help them pay the pool pass. We have a very large population of free and reduced meal kids at Terraset, which are the natural customers or clientele for walking to Shadowwood. And I think it's 35 or 40% of the kids who go to Terraset are on free and reduced meals. So that means there's a lot of need there. And what is it, $35 a pass? That can make a lot of difference to somebody who's getting free and reduced meals. Thanks.
Thanks. And thanks for answering that question for us. I think Leslie had one in the chat about heated pools. And while Reston Association doesn't have year-round heated pools, you're testing my knowledge, and hopefully I'll get this right, but I believe both Ridge Heights and North Shore are two heated pools within the association, and there are several that have heated spas. But right now, RCC, I do believe, unless it's a private pool, are the ones that is the one that's closest that you can use year round. I also sit on the comprehensive plan task force, and we've been talking a lot about, could we make sure that we keep top of mind for development in Reston, to have a center for indoor usage for the residents of Reston, and that has been a long-term goal of people in the community. So we are making sure to emphasize that, and looking at the location to be just north of Reston Town Center, where Fairfax County owns a big parcels of land up there, and we might be able to get a recreation center on that land in the future. Am I missing any questions in chat? I love that you guys are all using it. Do people walk to pools? I've attended all the other listening sessions, and I definitely have heard a lot of people say that's why they like Reston Association pools, is because they are those local community pools that they can walk to. And we have lots of paths in Reston that people walk on too. So I think that as a community, we must be focused on getting out and about and walking. So I hope that people are able to walk to their local pools, or like that's a benefit that we have within the community. Any other burning questions or comments out there? And one of the things that I'd love to hear back from people on is, what's really important. I mean, I know why I got involved with Reston Association, but what is important to you, or what do you think is really important to your neighbors that Reston Association can either help with, or pay attention to, or provide? Or what are some of those things that you'd rather Reston Association stay away from getting involved in? That's definitely very helpful information for those of us that sit on the board and we're asked, to make, judgment calls or vote on things. So would love to hear some of those. See, Tammy had their hand up.
I am stunned. I try to keep track, when I'm not too busy with land use issues, of on Nextdoor, which to me is the most widely used communication device in actually the whatever it is, the capture area is so much bigger now than it used to be. But I am continuously stunned at the lack of common knowledge about what RA controls. The public seems to think that RA is the Svengali who brought all of the development to Reston. They have no clue that RA is a homeowners association, and they ascribe all kinds of power that it never has had and never will have. So I would love to see on the webpage a very succinct synopsis of what power RA has, and a description of who is in charge of development, et cetera, et cetera. There's just massive misconception about who does what when. And I think I spoke before about, please, let's hold the line on major additions to our infrastructure until A, we're out of this COVID crisis, and B, we get the organization back to full staff and functioning and get our ducks in a row. I think that we're just, foolish if we start taking on more things to try to keep a handle on when we need to get the basics under control. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. As I said earlier, I'm a big researcher. So there is a web of understanding Reston, its relationship with Fairfax County, its relationship with Reston Community Center, what the Reston Association boundaries are. And I've even had Larry share with me a parcel map because it can be even confusing knowing what's RA covenant land, what's RA owned versus what's cluster owned, what's county owned. So that education, you do have to do a bit of research yourself if you want to kind of find that overview. So yeah, I would love to see us spend more time educating the public. And I also saw Deborah say information sharing for best practices among clusters. I know that Cam has started a quarterly newsletter last year, and him and his team are offering to meet with cluster leaders and actually come to you guys and walk your cluster and talk about what issues you're facing and give you some tips or information. They're the closest to talking with lots of different clusters. And so I know they have a lot of really good information that they can share. And then there's also, they have a portal that you can get to from the RA website to also get some more information about clusters. But I will tell you, and Julie's probably sitting and laughing because she was the past South Lakes district director. But those were my constant emails to Julie when I was just a member and not on the board. Information sharing and getting our members to talk to each other, getting the information out to them. And you have to communicate to people 7 different ways before you feel like you've gotten to all the different audiences, or you've gotten each of us to pay attention. Communicating where you guys are in the community, whether it's on next door or at the local pool or at the baseball field. That I will tell you has been one of my long-term goals. I very much wish that we had an email address for every RA member. I would love to see that be a goal of the association, and that we are communicating with you guys on a regular basis until you tell us, don't use my email address anymore. I don't want to hear from you. But I like proactive communication. But I know that our communications team tries to pull everything that they can together in a really nice email that they send out on Fridays. So if you're not signed up for the RA newsletter, I highly suggest that you add that to your potential reading list, because they send it out every morning at 9 a.m. and at 9:02 I'm on there reading all of the different articles. So please continue to share your ideas on how we can connect each other. Would love to hear those. Integrating people who are new to Reston, yes, is important because they don't know our history. I know that we have a welcome packet that I believe it's Cam's team sends out to all of our new owners. There you go. Thanks. See, Cam, as I'm saying it, he was reading my mind. So we do have that welcome guide that we send out to try to acclimate new owners to Reston. And Mike and our communications team put it together. So thank you, communications, for doing that. and I'm sure all the updates that need to be done to it each year to keep it current. Do any of my fellow directors have anything you'd like to share, or any questions you'd like to pop out to the great people we have on the call? Burning things you'd like to know?
I'm good, Jennifer. I think you're doing great.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bob, go for it. You're on mute though. Oh, I guess I have to ask you. Does that work? You didn't have.
There we go. I'm
There
sorry.
we go. No worries.
I have multiple screens open, so trying to find my cursor is a pain. I was just going to thank everybody for their very thoughtful comments and suggestions. I would like to let everybody know that CAM and the Covenants Group has reinstituted the legal seminar for clusters, and it was just completed on the 27th. So it was, and the materials will be available. If they're not available now, they'll be available shortly on the website. It was a very.
Thanks for reminding of us of that. I know that we got an email, I think it was last week about it. And you can see that this is my daughter, Skylar, who has decided that she does not want to play anymore on her own and wants to come join us. Any other questions or comments that you guys want to share with each other? Yes, you have to sign up for RA News because we don't have everybody's email address. I saw that Mike Leone put a link so you can subscribe to it, but it is not automatic. It is something that people have to choose to sign in or opt into versus opt out of. I'm a bigger fan of opt out clauses, but you know, we do want to make sure that we're not upsetting members by sending them information. So I think that there's just some sensitivity, and we can talk more about that, but some sensitivity to how much communication is over communication. Who wants to hear from us? Is it everyone or not?
Jennifer, there's also federal spam guidelines that affect newsletters, and you can't just send those out as much as we would like to.
Yes, anything that has any marketing in it, people do need to have a way to opt out of those types of communication versus just information sharing type emails.
Just a reminder too, Jennifer, every year on the election ballot, there is a section that allows members to opt in or opt out for various types of communication from RA.
Thank you, Karen. I do remember seeing that. If you vote online, there was a button I remember seeing last year to be able to do that.
And it may be on the paper ballot as well. I've been voting online for so long, I don't remember.
I know, I have too. But I bet there is one, either or whichever way people do want to vote. Okay. Oh, wait, there's more. Yes, unsubscribe button. Yeah, that's the CAN spam laws for sure. Well, if I don't see any other hands here, I will let you all get back to your night. Thank you so much for participating. Look, Sky was already ready to say goodbye. Thanks so much for participating. Please know that you can contact me or any other member of the board or the full board. And I thank you to Mike to put up my email address, my Reston email address. Also, just wanted to remind everyone again at the end here that our next member listening session is on Monday, October 4th at 6:30 p.m. With our at-large director. So thanks for joining tonight, and Skylar and I will say good night to everybody. Say bye. Have a good
Bye.
evening, everyone. Mwah. Yep, over here. That one.